They laughed when the old man came to open a bank account, but everything changed when they saw his balance. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. The heat shimmered off the asphalt in downtown Atlanta, casting waves of distortion into the air. It was just past noon on a Tuesday, and the streets buzzed with movement. Office workers returning from lunch, delivery vans squeezing into tight alleys, the distant cry of a siren slicing through the humidity. Inside the glass walls of Jefferson and Company, one of the city's most prestigious private banks, the air was still and cool. The scent of freshly brewed espresso lingered near the marble-paneled coffee bar, and the steady hum of fingers tapping on touchscreen terminals filled the otherwise quiet lobby. Everything gleamed. Chrome fixtures, floor tiles polished to a mirror-like finish, the soft reflection of sunlight filtered through tall windows. Clients moved in and out of the building like polished pieces on a chessboard. Men in tailored suits, women in crisp dresses and expensive heels. Conversations were murmured, purposeful, measured. The kind of place where silence signified money, and money was everything. At exactly 12:38 p.m., the front door slid open with a muted whisper, and an elderly black man stepped inside. His name was William Harris, though no one here knew that yet. He moved slowly but steadily, with the kind of gait that suggested a lifetime of work, not weakness. His clothes were clean but old, a faded button-down shirt tucked into slacks that had long lost their crease, a brown jacket that had seen too many winters, and shoes that had been resoled more times than he could remember. In one weathered hand he clutched a thick brown envelope. He paused just inside the doorway, allowing his eyes to adjust from the brightness outside, then started toward the front desk. His presence did not go unnoticed. A young receptionist at the front, no older than 25 and busy scrolling through something on her tablet, glanced up briefly. Her expression froze, neutral and tight. She shifted in her seat, adjusted her name badge, and muttered something under her breath. A security guard near the entrance instinctively stepped a few inches forward, watching the man without blinking, hand grazing the radio clipped to his belt. One of the clients in the waiting area, a man in a navy three-piece suit, tilted his head and looked William up and down with barely concealed amusement. Another, seated near a brochure rack, scoffed quietly and turned back to his phone. William, for his part, noticed none of it, or chose not to. He approached the front counter and stood patiently, his posture upright, the envelope clutched protectively to his chest. A few moments passed before the receptionist finally forced a smile and offered a clipped greeting. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes, ma'am," William said with quiet dignity. "I'm here to open a savings account for my grandson." She blinked. "A savings account?" "For my grandson," he repeated. "He's 8, been saving his birthday money, and his mama said it's time he learned how to use a bank. She helped me get all the documents in order." There was a long pause. The receptionist glanced sideways, clearly unsure what to do with him. After a moment, she tapped her screen and muttered something about a waiting number, then gestured vaguely toward the row of leather chairs against the wall. William took his slip, number C-109, and settled into one of the chairs. The envelope never left his hands. As he sat, he gently opened the flap and peeked inside, as if double-checking that the contents were still safe. He saw the careful handwriting of his daughter, a printed copy of her ID, a notarized letter of authorization, and his own photo ID tucked neatly in a plastic sleeve. The My Social card, too. All there. Everything she said would be needed. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders drop. For a moment, his thoughts drifted to his grandson. The boy's name was Jaden, and he had the kind of smile that lit up a room. Just a week ago, Jaden had handed him a little plastic box filled with crumpled bills and coins and said, "Grandpa, can we make it official? I want a real account." William had laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. "Real account it is." A synthetic chime echoed through the lobby. "Now, serving C-109 at window 3. He stood up slowly, tucked the envelope under his arm, and walked toward the indicated desk. Behind it sat a young man in a tailored shirt and pale blue tie, his desk organized with ruthless precision. The nameplate read, "Andrew Miller." He didn't look up immediately, finishing something on his tablet before offering a cursory glance. William extended a hand. "Good afternoon, son." Andrew hesitated, then gave a reluctant shake. "What can I help you with today?" His tone was polite, but it lacked warmth. William could feel the subtle disinterest radiating off the young man, but he pressed on. "I'd like to open a savings account," he said, "for my grandson. Got everything right here. My daughter helped me get it all ready." He slid the envelope across the desk. Andrew's eyes dropped to it briefly. He didn't touch it. "You're trying to open a custodial account?" he asked. "Yes, sir. That's the word she used. Custodial for Jaden. He's just started 3rd grade." Andrew tapped a few keys on his computer. "Do you have proof of guardianship, tax documentation, income verification for the parent or guardian?" William frowned slightly. "My daughter gave me her ID and authorization. I'm not the guardian, just helping him start off right." "That won't be enough," Andrew said, shaking his head. "We've had issues lately with fraud, new policies, stricter requirements." "I see," William said slowly, "but I called last week. They said a notarized letter and ID would be fine." Andrew leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "That might be what you were told, but I have to follow internal compliance procedures." His voice was neutral, but the implication was clear. William didn't belong here. Not in this bank. Not in this suit. Not in this chair. Not wasting his time. From across the room, someone laughed softly. William heard it. He straightened in his seat and nodded once, the way men do when they've heard enough. "I understand," he said. "If that's the case, then I'd like to close my accounts." Andrew blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said," William repeated calmly, "if I can't open an account for my grandson, then I would like to close my own. All of them." Andrew couldn't help himself. He chuckled. "Sir, are you sure? I mean, sometimes the fees for closure—" "Please," William said simply. Andrew sighed. "All right. I'll need your account number." William opened the envelope again, removed a folded sheet of paper, and slid it across the desk. Andrew typed the number into his system with one hand while reaching for a folder with the other. The screen loaded. Then everything stopped. The numbers stared back at him in quiet defiance. Andrew blinked, sat back, then leaned forward again, his fingers trembling as he re-entered the account number. The screen didn't lie. $25 million, $25 million. Deposited, distributed, invested, reinvested, spanning more than 3 decades. He opened the transaction history. There were transfers to development funds, massive deposits made quarterly, a long-standing relationship with the bank since its earliest days. He clicked through records. Steady, clean, consistent. William Harris wasn't just any client. He was a pillar, a legacy. A man whose silent dignity masked a financial presence that dwarfed almost every other account the branch had ever handled. Andrew felt his stomach drop. The air around him thickened. His ears rang. From somewhere behind him, the assistant branch manager had risen from his desk and was staring in their direction. A client turned his head to look. The receptionist paused in mid-scroll. A silence fell over the lobby like a held breath. And through it all, William sat, hands folded in his lap, watching the young man without a trace of triumph or anger. Just calm, unmoved. The silence broke when Andrew stood up suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. He looked pale, the collar of his shirt suddenly too tight. "Sir," he said, voice cracking, "would you please excuse me for a moment?" William nodded slowly. "I'll wait," he said. And he did, quietly, while the entire room reeled around him. Andrew's footsteps echoed down the hallway as he retreated from his desk, clutching a clipboard with trembling fingers. Behind the frosted glass of the operations room, his outline blurred with panic as he mumbled something to the assistant branch manager, who stiffened, glanced toward the lobby, and strode out of sight. The entire front of the bank had fallen into a muted paralysis. Conversations had halted. The barista paused midway through frothing milk. Even the soft jazz piped through the sound system seemed to fade into irrelevance as every eye followed the old man seated quietly at desk 3. William sat in silence, hands folded over the now empty envelope on his lap. He did not look around. He didn't scan the room or acknowledge the change in atmosphere. His gaze remained on the desk in front of him, calm and unhurried, as though nothing had shifted. And yet it had. The shift was seismic. A man who had just minutes earlier been dismissed as a nuisance, a misplaced relic in a place of sleek efficiency and tailored clientele, was now, suddenly, a threat to the bank's reputation, its bottom line, and the nerves of everyone employed within its polished walls. Andrew returned, his face drained of color, and resumed his seat stiffly, forcing himself to breathe through his nose. His eyes darted nervously toward the line of waiting clients, among them the well-dressed man in the navy suit who now fidgeted impatiently with his phone. The man glanced at his Rolex, exhaled audibly, and shifted his weight. "Mr. Harris," Andrew began, his voice overly polite, "I'd like to take a moment to ensure we can assist you properly. Would you mind waiting just a bit while I verify a few details with senior management?" William gave a single respectful nod. "Of course. Take your time." There was no sarcasm in his tone, no passive aggression, only the steady patience of a man who had lived through enough to know that time bends easily for those with power, and that silence could speak louder than anything else. Andrew stood again, this time with more care, and walked toward the manager's office. Every step seemed heavier than the last. Once inside, he closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a second, willing himself not to panic. The branch manager, Lisa Delgado, a sharply dressed woman in her early 40s with an assertive walk and no patience for drama, was already tapping her keyboard reviewing the account. "Is this a joke?" she asked without looking up. "No," Andrew replied. "It's real. 25 million. And we almost turned him away." Lisa's fingers froze. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you say to him?" I told him we needed more paperwork, that our compliance policies had changed." "You didn't even check the system before saying that?" Andrew swallowed hard. He looked like, You didn't think, period." Lisa clicked through more records, reading quickly. Her expression turned grave. "He's had this account with us since 1992. Auto investments, no overdrafts, no complaints. Looks like he invested heavily in our commercial real estate division in the early 2000s. That alone brought in 5 new clients. He's the backbone of this branch." "I know," Andrew said weakly. "And you denied him service?" "I didn't. I just—" He hesitated. "I judged him." Lisa let the silence speak. Then she sighed and stood. "I'll handle it." Back at the front desk, William remained seated, still unnoticed by most except the regular clients now uncomfortably aware that something significant was unfolding. A woman with a toddler on her hip avoided looking at him directly, though she kept sneaking sideways glances. An elderly man in a beige blazer, seated 2 chairs over, rubbed his chin and muttered to himself. A few others, who had smirked or shifted away earlier, now watched him with uncertain expressions, neither apologetic nor dismissive. Just unsure. Lisa approached with a practiced smile and extended her hand. "Mr. Harris, I'm Lisa Delgado, the branch manager here. I want to personally thank you for your long relationship with us and express how sorry I am for any inconvenience you've experienced today." William stood and took her hand with a firm but measured grip. "Appreciate that, ma'am. I understand you were interested in opening a custodial account for your grandson." "I was," he replied, "but I was told it wasn't possible under current policy." Lisa threw a glance toward Andrew, who now stood behind her silently, hands clasped tightly in front of him. "That was an unfortunate miscommunication. I assure you, with the documentation you have, we can absolutely begin the process." William nodded, the corners of his mouth tight. "Well, I don't want to cause a stir, but when I walk into a bank, any bank, and get treated like I've wandered into the wrong building, I begin to wonder whether my grandson will face the same." Lisa's smile faltered for the briefest second. "Of course. And I want to make it clear that we're addressing that issue internally." "I see." Another pause. William's face remained impassive, but his eyes, the calm, steady brown of a man who had built things with his hands and buried friends and outlasted injustice, watched every twitch of her face. "Now," he said finally, "I asked Mr. Miller here to close all my accounts." Lisa inhaled sharply. "I would strongly encourage you to reconsider. You're a highly valued client. Your history with this institution goes back longer than most of our staff have been alive. We'd hate to lose you over a single—" "It's not just a single mistake," William interrupted gently. "It's a pattern, one I've seen all my life. I come in here dressed the way I always dress. I speak with the same voice I've always used, but the moment someone sees my skin, sees my age, sees these clothes, they decide I must not belong." Lisa's throat worked as she nodded slowly. Andrew, still behind her, had paled further. "And let me be clear," William continued, "I'm not angry. Anger would be too easy. I'm just disappointed, because I had hoped, maybe naively, that things had changed more than this." The room felt smaller, denser. Even those not directly part of the conversation seemed to shrink into their seats, aware that they were hearing something important. Lisa cleared her throat. "Would it help if we assigned a dedicated client manager to you moving forward? Someone you trust?" "I had that already," William said, "for over 20 years. His name was Paul Linden, retired in 2018. Treated me like a human being every time I came in. We never talked about balances, we talked about grandkids, books. He once brought me coffee before I even sat down." Andrew opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His cheeks flushed with shame. "I see," Lisa said. "I'll be honest, Mr. Harris, I don't want you to leave us. But if you feel that's the right choice, I will personally oversee the transfer of your funds. Just say the word." William looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "I'll think about it, but only after I open that account for my grandson." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Lisa exhaled slowly, nodded, and turned to Andrew. "You'll handle it correctly this time." Andrew nodded. "Yes, ma'am." William sat down again, placed the envelope on the desk, and looked at the young man in front of him. Andrew fumbled briefly with the computer before beginning the new account setup. Throughout the process, William remained silent. He answered questions when asked. He provided the documents, but his demeanor was not the same. It was quieter now, not submissive, never that, but withdrawn. He gave no further commentary. He did not smile. When the account creation reached the final stage, Andrew asked, "And the initial deposit?" $5,000, William said. "It's everything my grandson's saved up so far, every birthday, every chore. It's his whole world." Andrew nodded, his fingers shaking as he typed. Then he printed out the documents, placed them neatly into a folder, and handed them to William. "It's done." William stood, collected the folder, and looked at the young man again. His gaze was not harsh, but it was heavy. "Thank you," he said. Andrew tried to respond, but the words caught in his throat. William turned and walked toward the glass doors, the sunlight pouring in behind him. Just before reaching the exit, he paused. He didn't turn back. He simply said, to no one in particular, "My grandson's name is Jaden. He'll be back one day. I hope this place is ready for him." And then he left. Andrew remained standing long after he was gone, the cursor blinking on his screen like an accusation. Behind him, Lisa said nothing. She didn't need to. Everyone had heard. Everyone had seen. But only Andrew truly understood what had been lost. The branch was quieter than usual the following morning. Something had shifted, intangible yet unmistakable. The barista's cheerful greetings were more subdued, the usual clatter of cups and casual chatter toned down to murmurs. Even the keyboard taps from the tellers seemed more hesitant, more cautious, as though each staff member was waiting for something, or perhaps bracing for it. Andrew Miller sat at his desk with a hollow expression. His morning routine was a blur. Tie knotted, coffee sipped, screen unlocked, but nothing felt real. He had barely slept the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw William Harris's calm face, heard his measured voice, felt the weight of what had happened. He had made assumptions, the kind that came too easily, too often. He'd seen an old man in worn clothes and had jumped to a conclusion without so much as verifying a single fact. It wasn't just about the account or the transaction. It was about judgment, about disrespect, about the rot that crept in when convenience replaced integrity. The damage was done. At 9:15 a.m., an internal memo circulated from the regional office requesting an incident report from Lisa Delgado by end of day. Not 5 minutes later, Lisa called a full staff meeting in the main conference room. The blinds were drawn, phones were silenced. Nobody smiled. Lisa stood at the head of the table, her hands resting firmly on the glass surface. She didn't waste time on preamble. Yesterday, this branch mishandled an interaction with one of our most valuable long-term clients. That client has requested a full review of his accounts, including transfer protocols. If he proceeds, we're looking at losing over $25 million in assets under management. She paused, letting the number sink in. A few staff members exchanged nervous glances. But more than that, we nearly destroyed a relationship built over 30 years. all because we failed to recognize the human being in front of us. Her gaze settled on Andrew. He sat stiffly in his chair, back straight, hands folded on the table. He didn't blink. Mr. Harris came in with the intent to open a custodial account for his grandson. He was dismissed, doubted, delayed publicly, and it could have cost us dearly, not just financially, but reputationally. This incident is already being reviewed at the corporate level. We're on the radar now. Lisa exhaled, the anger in her voice tempered by something colder, disappointment. I'm not here to assign blame in front of the team. That conversation will happen privately. But I want everyone here to understand one thing. The next time you see someone walk through those doors, no matter what they're wearing, how they speak, or how slowly they move, you look them in the eye and ask yourself, what if that was my grandfather? She dismissed the team. The room emptied quickly, murmurs trailing behind uneasy footsteps. Andrew stayed behind. Lisa sat across from him once the room cleared. There was a moment of silence between them. The faint hum of the central air was the only sound. I don't need to repeat what you already know, she said. I understand, he replied quietly. I believe you do, but understanding and learning aren't always the same thing. He nodded. I'd like to make it right. Lisa studied him. There was no arrogance in his face now, no practiced coolness, just a kind of raw awareness and guilt. He's requested account closures, all of them. Personal, business, investment. He said he's looking elsewhere. You understand what that means? It means he's gone, Andrew said. It means we failed, Lisa corrected. But maybe, just maybe, not beyond repair. She handed him a printed list. At the top, William Harris. Beneath that, account numbers, dates, linked institutions, beneficiaries, trust assignments. There were dozens of entries. I want you to process the closure requests personally. I've told compliance. You'll handle every form, every signature, every phone call. You owe him that. Andrew took the paper. Yes, ma'am. Lisa didn't move. And then, he looked up. Then I want to find him. I want to apologize, not for the bank, for myself. Her eyes softened for a moment. If you do, don't bring paperwork. Bring humility. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Andrew tried to focus, reviewing documents, verifying balances, coordinating transfers. But his mind wandered, back to William's eyes, his voice, the way he had walked away without raising it. Around mid-afternoon, Andrew opened a browser tab and began searching. He started simple. William Harris, Atlanta. The results were overwhelming. There were dozens of William Harrises, but he narrowed the search with keywords: construction, philanthropy, donations. Then he found it. An old article from a local paper, dated 1996. A photo of William, standing beside the mayor at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new elementary school. The caption read, Local developer William Harris donates $500,000 toward inner-city school rebuilding project. He clicked through more results. A 2002 article on post-hurricane reconstruction efforts. Williams' company had led a team of volunteers rebuilding public housing units. A 2010 piece about a youth mentorship program he'd funded. A 2015 op-ed from a retired city planner calling him a quiet titan of community restoration. Andrew sat back in his chair. He hadn't served a man in need. He had dismissed a man who had spent decades serving everyone else. The photos told the rest of the story. William in a hard hat beside a new community center. William shaking hands with city officials. William at a local food drive, handing out boxes with a smile, always dressed simply, always in the background. Andrew read each caption slowly. One in particular stopped him cold. "People think success wears a suit," it said, quoting William, "but sometimes it wears overalls and it gets its hands dirty. That's the kind of success I believe in." His chest tightened. He remembered the look on William's face when he said, "I'm not angry, I'm disappointed." That was worse than anger. It was the kind of disappointment that stuck, that haunted. He opened a blank document and began typing. "Dear Mr. Harris," he wrote, but the words didn't come. Nothing seemed enough. He closed the document. It was too easy to hide behind an email or a letter. He needed to see him. Andrew spent the evening calling contacts, checking public directories, combing through local business registries. It was late when he finally found an address tied to Harris Development, LLC. It was registered to a modest property on the west side of the city, a quiet residential street with tree-lined sidewalks and brick bungalows. He printed out directions and laid out his best shirt. No tie, no blazer. Not this time. Sleep didn't come easy that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city through the open window. Every so often, he imagined the look on William's face when he opened the door. Would he slam it shut? Would he listen? Would he forgive? The next morning, the city woke up to another cloudless day. Andrew pulled up to the curb outside the address just after 9. He sat in his car for a full minute before stepping out, heart pounding. The house was small but well kept, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. He walked up the steps, straightened his shoulders, and rang the bell. A woman answered, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a bun, eyes sharp but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Andrew said, voice tight. "My name is Andrew Miller. I work at Jefferson and Company. I came to apologize to Mr. Harris, personally." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Wait here." He stood on the porch, trying to steady his breath. Moments later, the door opened again, and there stood William. He looked exactly the same. Calm, quiet, composed. His eyes met Andrew's without surprise. "Mr. Miller," he said simply. "You came." Andrew nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'm sorry. For everything." William didn't speak right away. He looked at the man in front of him. No suit, no pretense, no arrogance. Just a young man who had learned something the hard way. Finally, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." And Andrew did. Not as a banker, but as a man who was finally learning what it meant to see. The living room smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. It was quiet, warmly lit by the soft morning light seeping in through gauzy curtains. The decor was modest but tasteful, framed photos of children and grandchildren on the wall, a worn bookshelf filled with novels and biographies, a handmade quilt folded over the back of the couch. It was the kind of space built not to impress but to live in, filled with traces of memory, time, and care. Andrew stepped inside hesitantly, his hands at his sides, resisting the urge to fidget or smooth his collar. William motioned toward the couch without a word, then moved into the kitchen. Andrew sat down slowly, feeling out of place in a way he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer on home turf, no longer behind the gleam of a polished desk or protected by a nameplate. Here, he was just a man who had come to answer for his failure. A moment later, William returned with 2 mugs of coffee and set one down in front of him. He settled into the armchair across the room, taking his own mug with both hands. Neither of them spoke for a minute. The ticking of an old wall clock filled the space between them. It wasn't silence out of tension. It was a deliberate calm, the way storms sometimes stall over a field before breaking. "I read your letter," William said finally, his voice even, low. Andrew looked up. "I didn't send it." "You didn't need to," William replied, nodding toward the folder still clutched in Andrew's lap. "You brought it. That means more." Andrew hesitated, then placed the folder on the coffee table between them. It contained his handwritten apology, along with his own notes, drafts, and internal report copies, none of which had been requested. It was everything he had been too late to say the first time. "I came because I wanted you to know that I meant what I said. Back at the bank, I wasn't just following policy. I was following assumptions. I saw what I wanted to see, not what was in front of me. And I'm ashamed of that." William sipped his coffee. His expression didn't change. "I've been watching people make those same assumptions for longer than you've been alive," he said. "But it's not often they come back. I had to." "I know." Another pause followed. Andrew felt his nerves begin to calm slightly, but the weight of his mistake lingered in the room like a shadow that refused to lift. "I looked you up," Andrew said. "Your company, your work, everything you've done for the city, for the schools, the housing programs, the libraries. It's incredible." William smiled faintly, almost wearily. "I didn't do any of it for recognition. I did it because I could. Because someone needed to. I was a bricklayer before I became a builder. Then I built a business. Then I tried to build better things around me." "You built more than that," Andrew said quietly. "You built trust, legacy, and I crushed that in minutes." William shook his head. "No, you didn't crush it, you cracked it. The difference is whether you come back with a hammer or a patch kit." Andrew met his eyes. "Then let me repair it. Not for me. For your grandson." That brought a slight change in William's expression. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, fingers curled around the mug. "You remember his name?" he asked. "Jaden," Andrew said without hesitation. 8 years old. Saved every dollar from birthdays and chores to start a savings account. You said it was his whole world." William nodded slowly. "It is." Andrew's voice softened. "Let me help him open that account. Let me explain everything to him. What a bank is, how savings grow. Let me give him the experience he deserved the first time." William didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his mug down and stood, walking to the fireplace mantel. He picked up a small photo in a wooden frame. It showed a young boy with a wide grin, missing a front tooth, holding a football twice the size of his head. He stared at it for a long moment. "I never had a savings account until I was 38, he said. "Didn't know what one was. My daddy never had one. His daddy didn't even have a checking account. We kept money in jars, boxes, under the mattress. Trust in a bank? That was a luxury we weren't allowed." Andrew said nothing. "I wanted Jaden to start differently, to see it not as something mysterious or elite, but as a tool, something that worked for him. I thought if I came with him, handed the teller his little envelope of crumpled bills, it would be a memory for him. Instead, it became a memory for me. One I don't want to repeat." "I understand," Andrew replied, "and I want to do it right. Not just the paperwork. I want him to walk away proud. I want him to know he matters." William turned around slowly and studied the younger man. There was no smugness in Andrew's face, no arrogance, just sincerity, and something more, a willingness to be shaped by shame instead of swallowed by it. "Saturday," William said. "We'll come in Saturday morning." Andrew blinked. You will?" "If you're going to teach my grandson about savings," William replied, You better start on time." Andrew stood too quickly, knocking his knee against the coffee table. "I'll be there," he said. "Early. I'll prepare materials. I'll make it meaningful." William chuckled lightly. "Don't turn it into a classroom. Just treat him like you wish someone treated you when you were 8. Andrew smiled. "Deal." As he left the house that morning, Andrew felt lighter than he had in days. Not forgiven, perhaps, but trusted with a second chance. And sometimes that was more powerful than forgiveness. Back at the branch, he stayed late preparing. He crafted a simplified account overview booklet with Jaden's name printed on the cover. He sourced a colorful savings chart and added gold star stickers for milestones. He dug through archived promo materials to find an old children's savings book the bank had once used during a literacy campaign. It had cartoon characters and rhyming lines. Cheesy, yes, but endearing. Lisa passed by his desk around 7:30 p.m. and raised an eyebrow. "Working late?" Andrew nodded without looking up. "Saturday. I'm getting ready." She paused, watching him. Then she gave a short nod. "Good." The next day passed in a blur. Andrew rehearsed explanations aloud in his apartment, imagining how to describe compound interest to an 8-year-old. He tested ways to make concepts feel like stories, not lessons. He even practiced kneeling to Jaden's height to make the interaction feel less formal, more personal. Saturday arrived with bright skies and cool air. The branch, open for special appointments only, was quiet when Andrew arrived. He unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and laid everything out with care. One seat for William, one for Jaden, and a space across the desk for himself. He added a plate of cookies near the coffee machine, unsure if Jaden would like them but hoping it might help. At exactly 10 a.m., the glass door opened. William stepped in first, holding Jaden's hand. The boy looked around with wide eyes, clutching a small zippered pouch to his chest. Andrew stood and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Harris, and you must be Jaden." Jaden nodded shyly. "Hi." Andrew knelt, eye level with him. "I'm Mr. Andrew. You ready to become a bank customer today?" Jaden nodded more confidently now. "I saved $52. "That's amazing," Andrew said. "That's more than I had at your age. You know what we're going to do today?" Jaden shook his head. "We're going to make a special account just for you, a place for your money to grow like a garden, and you'll get your own book to watch it grow." The boy grinned. "Can I put stickers in it?" "Absolutely," Andrew said. "In fact, I brought some just for you." The appointment took 40 minutes. Andrew explained everything with patience, using metaphors, drawings, and simple language. Jaden asked smart questions, and William watched silently, his expression unreadable but his eyes soft. When it was over, Andrew handed Jaden his new savings passbook and said, "This is yours now. Keep it safe. It's not just paper. It's your future." Jaden took it with both hands like a treasure. William rose from his seat and extended a hand. Andrew stood and shook it. "Thank you," William said simply. "No," Andrew replied. "Thank you." As they left, Jaden turned back and waved. Andrew waved back. He watched them walk down the sidewalk, hand in hand, the boy's voice carrying back faintly. "Grandpa, I'm going to save 100 next." Andrew smiled and closed the door. Something had changed. In him, in the bank, in the way he saw his job, not just accounts, not just transactions, but people, lives, hopes and envelopes. It had taken failure to show him that, but it was never too late to start building something better. Monday morning came with a different kind of energy at the Jefferson and Company branch. There was no grand announcement, no overnight renovation or rebranding, but something subtle had shifted in the air. A current of quiet purpose flowed beneath the usual hum of printers and the soft clacking of polished shoes. The weekend had left its imprint not on the decor, but on the people. There was a noticeable softness in the greetings, a longer pause before dismissing a question, a certain attentiveness that hadn't existed a week ago. Andrew arrived earlier than usual. He unlocked his office, set his things down, and took a long look at the small drawing taped beside his monitor. It hadn't been part of any official interaction. Jaden had handed it to him shyly at the end of their Saturday appointment, saying only, "I made this last night." It was a crayon sketch of a boy and a man shaking hands at a bank desk with the words, "My First Bank," written in a child's uneven handwriting across the top. The stick figures had big smiles and wide eyes. Andrew had nearly cried when he accepted it. Now he kept it visible, not just as a reminder, but as a guide. That day with Jaden had done more than repair what had broken. It had transformed how he saw everything about his role. For the first time, he understood that his job wasn't about managing numbers. It was about protecting people's beginnings. As the day wore on, customers came and went, many of them unaware of the recent events that had reshaped the tone of the entire staff. But the tellers knew. The advisors knew. Even the part-time barista, who now greeted visitors by name when she could, had felt the shift. William Harris had never made a scene. He hadn't raised his voice or demanded retribution. But his quiet dignity had settled over the building like a veil, forcing everyone to confront what they had ignored too long. It wasn't long before William and Jaden returned. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and Andrew happened to be helping a young couple understand their mortgage options when he spotted the familiar silhouette near the entrance. William stood straight despite his years, the same worn jacket and calm expression in place. Beside him, Jaden clutched a manila envelope and wore a serious face that only deepened when he caught sight of Andrew and broke into a wide grin. The couple noticed Andrew's reaction and turned to see the source. "Excuse me a moment," Andrew said with a smile, and then made his way to greet them. Jaden beamed. "Mr. Andrew, we're back." "I see that," Andrew said. "And what brings you in today, young sir?" Jaden puffed out his chest with pride. "I want to start a certificate of deposit. Grandpa says I'm a long-term investor now." William chuckled, stepping forward. He's been reading up. Andrew knelt slightly to meet Jaden's eye. "So, this isn't just about saving for toys anymore?" Jaden shook his head. "I want to go to college. I want to be an architect like Grandpa used to be. I'm saving for school now." The words struck Andrew harder than expected. He looked up at William, who nodded, his gaze distant and proud. "That's a serious goal," Andrew said, "and a CD is a very grown-up way to start working toward it." Jaden's eyes sparkled. "Can we start today?" Andrew led them into a private conference room, offering them water and retrieving the necessary forms. He remembered to take things slowly, not because he thought Jaden wouldn't understand, but because he had learned that patience was a form of respect. He explained what a CD was, how interest accumulated over time, why Jaden wouldn't be able to withdraw the money for a while, and what that meant. Jaden listened with focused attention, occasionally glancing at William to see if he was getting it right. When the paperwork was complete, Andrew slid the folder across the table. "Would you like to sign, Mr. Harris?" he asked. Jaden blinked. "Me?" "This is your account," Andrew said. "You're the primary. You've earned that signature spot. Jaden looked down at the line. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the pen. He signed in blocky, determined letters. William said nothing, but his eyes misted slightly. Andrew caught it and looked away respectfully. As they left the room, Jaden clutched his new documents like they were made of gold. In the lobby, several employees who had witnessed the original incident nodded in greeting. Some smiled genuinely, others shyly, but all were aware of who this young man was, and who his grandfather was. When the door closed behind them, Andrew turned to find Lisa waiting near the teller counter. She had seen the whole exchange from a distance. "I think we need to update our new employee training materials," she said. Andrew raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "With a module on what a real client looks like," she replied. He nodded. That would be a start. By Friday, word of Jaden's CD account had spread. Not in a formal memo, but in conversations over coffee, in passing mentions at the printer, in hushed tones between staff who had witnessed the ripple effect firsthand. There had been no publicity, no articles or posts online, but the bank was changing. During that week's staff meeting, Lisa made a quiet but decisive announcement. She spoke about empathy, about assumptions, and about legacy. She cited William Harris's name directly, referring to him as a client who taught us more in one visit than we'd learned in 10 seminars. She also named Andrew as the point person for developing a new client initiative, one focused on community outreach, financial literacy, and youth engagement. "We'll call it the Jaden Project," she said, "a program for first-time savers and young investors." The room burst into soft applause. Later that afternoon, a grandmother arrived with her 12-year-old grandson. She wore a frayed cardigan and held a well-used purse. Her expression was tentative, unsure if she belonged in a bank like this, but Andrew greeted her with a warm smile and invited them to sit. He brought over a set of forms, offered a cookie, and explained everything the boy wanted to know. He didn't see clothes anymore. He saw stories. He saw beginnings. By the time the branch closed that evening, the walls still gleamed as always, but now they reflected something more than polish. They reflected humility, growth, a willingness to be better. As Andrew locked up for the night, he paused at the window. Outside, the city was winding down. Families walking home from work, children laughing across the street, a father hoisting his daughter onto his shoulders. Among the flow of faces, Andrew spotted two figures walking hand in hand, William and Jaden. The boy was animated, talking with excitement, waving his hands as he explained something. William nodded along, listening with quiet intensity. Andrew didn't wave. He didn't knock on the glass. He just watched. He watched a man who had once been invisible to him walk tall with a grandson whose dreams now had a place to grow. And that was enough. Not for celebration, but for purpose. The last weeks of spring slipped into the early rhythm of summer, bringing with them the heat that rose from Atlanta's sidewalks and shimmered across the windshields of parked cars. The city moved with its usual pulse, urgent and distracted, commuters bustling across intersections, buses hissing at every stop, sirens crying in the distance like an echo of something never quite resolved. But inside the Jefferson and Company branch on Peachtree Street, the pace had changed. It wasn't slower, just more intentional, quieter. There was a new atmosphere, less like a corporate office, more like a gathering place for stories waiting to unfold. Andrew sat in his office with the door slightly open, flipping through the latest report from the Jaden Project. Since its quiet launch 2 weeks earlier, They had opened over 40 new accounts for minors. 22 of those were accompanied by legal guardians who had never had accounts of their own. Several came from neighborhoods that rarely interacted with banks outside of cashing paychecks or paying utility bills. The reception wasn't loud, but it was real, tangible, a shift toward trust that had long been absent. What struck Andrew the most wasn't the numbers, it was the faces. The nervous hands passing over wrinkled envelopes. The kids who hesitated before signing their names, but beamed afterward. The parents and grandparents who sat a little taller when someone looked them in the eye and said, "We're glad you're here." Every new name entered into the system felt less like a customer and more like a seed planted. They weren't selling financial products anymore. They were cultivating something far more meaningful. The door creaked and Lisa stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you'd need a refill," she said, setting one down on his desk. "Thanks," Andrew replied, still reading. "We had a mom come in yesterday with 3 boys under 12. All 3 opened accounts. She said it was the first time someone called her kids investors. She cried when we printed their welcome letters." Lisa sat down in the chair across from him and nodded. "It's happening, isn't it?" "It is," he said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the muffled activity outside the office. The printer whirred. A child's voice laughed faintly from the lobby. Somewhere, someone was asking how interest rates worked. Lisa looked at him. "You know, William Harris came by yesterday afternoon?" Andrew looked up, surprised. "I missed him?" "He asked for you, but didn't want to interrupt. Left something for you instead." She pulled a sealed envelope from her jacket pocket and handed it over. Andrew held it for a second, running his thumb over the paper, then opened it carefully. Inside was a single note on thick cream stationery. The handwriting was steady, deliberate. "Mr. Miller, thank you for remembering that real service begins where assumptions end. You've made a space where my grandson feels seen, not just served. That's more than I ever got at his age, more than most ever do. He told me last night that he wants to build a library on every street that doesn't have one. I told him, then you better start saving. He said, I already am. Legacy doesn't begin with wealth, it begins with worth. You helped show him that. Keep going. W. Harris." Andrew folded the letter slowly, eyes stinging. He placed it gently in his desk drawer beside the crayon drawing. The next Saturday, the bank hosted its first community open house. No flashy banners or catered lunches, just folding chairs set out in neat rows and hand-drawn signs that said, "Let's talk about money," decorated by children who had opened accounts through the Jaden project. William arrived with Jaden just after noon. The boy wore a white shirt and blue clip-on tie, gripping a binder filled with his savings records and a few crumpled index cards. Andrew approached them with a smile. "You ready for your big talk?" he asked. Jaden nodded with determination. "I practiced." They sat in the front row as a few staff members gave short, plain language talks on how banking worked. Then, to close the event, Lisa stood up and said they had a very special guest. Jaden took the microphone with both hands. "My name is Jaden Harris," he began, voice wavering at first. "I used to keep my money in a shoebox. Then my grandpa brought me here. Now I keep it in a place that helps it grow. One day I want to build stuff like libraries and schools, and I want to help kids like me save money so they can do big things too. If I can save, you can too." Applause broke out in a way that surprised even the adults. There was laughter and a few tears, and in the back, William sat with his head bowed slightly. not in embarrassment or humility, but in reverence. For the boy he was raising, for the future he was witnessing unfold. After the event, Andrew walked them to the door. Jaden turned and asked, "Will there be another one?" "We're planning one every month," Andrew said, "but only if you promise to give another speech." Jaden grinned. "I will." William shook Andrew's hand. "You didn't just change his account," he said. "You changed his view of what's possible." Andrew looked at him, no longer unsure, no longer guilty, but grounded. "You both changed mine first." The sun hung low in the sky as they stepped outside, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Jaden ran ahead, jumping between the shadows like stepping stones. William followed slowly, cane tapping a gentle rhythm, his shoulders straight. Inside the branch, the last of the guests trickled out. The staff buzzed with stories, of conversations had, of people met, of names remembered. The transformation wasn't just in outreach or programs. It was in the faces of every employee who now looked at a customer and wondered, "What's your story?" As Andrew closed up that evening, he stood once more at the window. Jaden and William were just two small shapes in the distance now, framed by sunlight and the thrum of city life. But they were more than a pair walking home. They were symbols of everything that mattered, of how deeply one quiet man had changed a room full of people without ever raising his voice, of how a boy with a binder of savings and a dream could inspire an entire institution to rethink its purpose. The crumpled envelope, the worn jacket, the voice that never wavered even when dismissed. It had taken all of that for the bank to remember what service really meant. And now, every child who walked through that door with a dream would find something waiting for them. Not just a form to fill, but a place to belong. Legacy, after all, wasn't just passed down in money. It was built, one quiet decision at a time, by those who remembered to see what others forgot to notice. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next one. Check out our other powerful stories, and if this one touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to see it.